Hello, White Tanishi, Yesukuskwai Kabiniskis. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, we can't see your smiling faces because we are in boring webinar mode because so many of you want to come and join us. We can't fit you all in a meeting. So we've got 260, 70, and 80 and climbing 300. Yay! Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome in. Somebody's done it. There's always somebody who shows up with the reactions. That's how we know you're here. So yeah, it's in the bottom bar. You might have to hit the three dots that say more, and you can use those reactions so we can see you. The other thing you can do if it makes this more accessible for you is to use that more button and turn on the closed captions, and that will have an AI generated transcript of what we're saying to the best of its ability. So if that helps you to participate, great. We are recording. That recording, you'll get a link to that and your certificate of attendance in a follow-up email, which you should have by 12 p.m. Pacific. You can use the chat to say hi. And please make sure when you hit the button, there's a blue button that says hosts and panelists or everyone. If you want to share your message with the world, you can hit everyone. And if you need to send a private message, you can hit Steph or my names. If any of you have done the super uber new Zoom update, when the slideshows are being shared, you will now find at the top of your black screen a tab like you were on sort of Google Chrome or something like that. And one of them will say speakers and one of them will say presentation. So if you can't see the presentation, you might find it up there. We're learning as we go. Okay, I'm going to dive in. I did that all differently than I normally do, but that's the joy of these things. We just go in our place and we just roll around and do what makes us happy. I'm going to share my slides and then we can dive in. Okay, it should be playing awesome bird noises. It's not. That's okay. These things happen. But welcome to the Outdoor Learning Spring Virtual Workshop series. You can imagine the sounds of birds call, which it did several minutes ago when we tested it, but such is technology. It is the 30th of April. I can't believe it's the end of April already. And we are developing a sense of place by sparking curiosity and wonder with these fantastic humans who are introduced in just a moment. But we have Michelle McKay, Klara, Redford, and Gillian, Judson with us here for this fantastic gathering. I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement in this space. And Gillian and I were in a workshop together yesterday, and I showed this picture, which I took yesterday. So I'm incredibly grateful that it's been raining for the last few days. We had a really low snow year where I live. I live at the baseline of two mountain ranges in interior British Columbia, which for the Snipes, the people of the bull trout, whose traditional territory I'm on, they call Skikitin in the Inselchin language, and Skikitin means where the ridgelines meet the water. And I live along the banks of the Columbia River, or Sinhuitqua. Sinhuitqua means swift river, and it's been very dry here all winter. And dry winters mean much higher risk of forest fires and extreme forest fires. Small fires are a natural part of the ecosystem, but everyone was really frightened, and it's been raining for 5 days. And I was walking my pup. This is actually the school field right next to me, and all of the dandelions just came to life. And so I'm incredibly grateful for the knowledge that I have from Métis educator Leah Marie Dorion around the importance of dandelions. I'm incredibly grateful for the knowledge of rain and the importance of rain and water, and particularly how it feeds into the river system where I live and then back to me through the stories of the Snipes, the Secwepemc, the Silks, and the Tnaha First Nations, who also have stories about this place that I gratefully call home. And so I'm grateful for the rain, and I'm grateful for the knowledge and the traditional knowledge that gives me a deeper connection to it in this moment. In order to encourage that, we have just launched, and if you're not familiar with this, this is a program that's now been running for several years, our Indigenous advisor and director of Indigenous Learning now, Jenna Jasic, first cultivated this just for us in-house to train, and then it grew and grew and grew, and we're going into season 3 of 4 seasons of Indigenous Learning, and these are different levels of online self-paced learning within a monthly gathering with a different Indigenous speaker to share their perspective and their personal journey on truth and reconciliation. It is open for Indigenous folks, non-Indigenous folks. It is free for anybody Indigenous if they request it, and it's just a really wonderful opportunity to hear different perspectives from across Turtle Island or North America, and I'm really excited to be a part of that hosting team. Steph's here with me today.
Hey, thanks for making that nice slide of me.
You look so cool. I couldn't not. You just scaling the rock. You're so strong and powerful.
One day we'll go climbing together. Yeah. And that is me climbing in just outside of Duncan, which is where I live on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. And that is Coast Salish land. I've seen people writing in on the chat already, also calling in from Coast Salish territory. It's nice to have folks calling in from all over here. And Duncan, more specifically, is home of the Kwatsan Nation and the Cowichan tribes, the unceded land of the Halkamenim speaking people. And yeah, it's always shade your land acknowledgement is it's also a chance to think about how just the different, the dandelions have been out here for a while, and but things are always changing every year, and having the connection to thinking about when things have come out this year, is it different than last year? I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and I was in a meeting with the Indigenous School Food Circle earlier today, and everyone was talking about their favorite seasonal local food from the land, and I was thinking about thimbleberries, and it's just about time for the Swainson's thrush to come back, and that's all called the salmonberry bird because it means the salmon berries are coming, and I'm any day now I'm gonna hear the call, and summer is almost here, and yeah, it's nice to see everyone talking about where they're coming from in the chat. We're gonna switch to a poll where we can kind of be more official about it in there, but I will see you all in the chat helping with links and any technical difficulties, things like that. So I will see you in there.
Thanks, Steph. Always wonderful to be with you here. And yeah, if you have questions, Q&A for our wonderful presenters, you can use the Q&A button or the chat, and we'll collect them up and put them into a document, and we'll try and pose as many as we can at the end, seeing how much time we have.
Oh yeah, and I guess I should have said also that why I'm the program manager at Take Me Outside. That's why that logo's there. I keep forgetting to say who I am in relation to this workshop, so sorry about that.
And a finer program manager there have never been seen. That was not correct grammar. I was going a bit Shakespearean, but it just came out as poorly worded. But you are fantastic at what you do. And if you're not signed up for Take Me Outside Day or had seen that, or Take Me Outside Week, they also have a winter challenge which is finished now, but have a look at the Take Me Outside website, and incredible free resources to participate in outdoor learning. All right, I'm doing it. Let's do these introduction polls. I'm launching them. Okay, I've chosen the one this time that is a worldwide. So we'll just see whether you're joining us from which sort of continent, or I've split North America or Turtle Island. And then at the bottom, what kind of educator are you? If you don't feel like you're represented there, or you do a bunch of different things, feel free to let us know in the chat. It's really fantastic to see the diversity of people that join us. And we have had people, do you remember how many different countries people joined from, Steph? I think it's like 56 different countries people have signed up from. Nobody has ever joined from Antarctica. And I've got friends down there like doing research and things. I think, apparently the Wi-Fi is not very good though. Okay. All right, we'll just leave it open for 5 more seconds. 4, 3, a 2, and a 1. I'm going to end that poll and share the results with you. So we're a primarily northern group today, and we have so even some older grades, but a little bit more of a early childhood and lower grade representation today, which makes sense given the resource. But I do think there's a little bit of something for everybody. And I just love how many people were here. Nearly 600, and just the passion that you show up for these things, the work that we're all doing in this space, it does make a real difference. And so congratulations for being here, for showing up. All of you matter. We have like 100 different partners and things who have amazing resources and ideas and lesson plans, funding opportunities, all these different things. There's a link in the chat. So if you want to get to know any of these friends, you can do that there. We have friends in the US as well as internationally. Okay, and somebody asked me about dandelions. Well, this is the person that taught me all I know about dandelions. And Leah Marie is actually going to run a 4-part workshop series called Connecting to the Land the Métis Way, which will be around relative with roots and her dandelion work. And that's an opportunity. It's 4 60-minute Zooms, but in a meeting mode. So we are connecting and in being a bit more interactive. So if you're excited to sign up, that's early bird ends May 31st. And we mention it every week because it's important. We spent a really long time developing this. If you are interested in diving a bit deeper into your outdoor learning practice, we've done a sort of 30-hour certification, which involves self-paced online learning and joining us for live workshops, again, that are interactive. That enable you to hopefully embed professional outdoor learning into your professional work. And it's for K-12 educators. Okay, let's get to the juicy bit. We are here to talk about developing a sense of place. Well, our walking curriculum for the early years, which involves developing a sense of place by sparking curiosity and wonder. Now, I've had the deep pleasure of spending time learning from these 3 incredible humans now in a couple of different spaces. And I was lucky enough to get to sort of do a review edit of this book, like have a look at it while it was being made by a beautiful designer called Sarah as well. It's just delightful and something that I'm using in all different family and workspaces. And so I'm really excited to learn more about it in this space and for them to share with you. And so here we got, so Dr. Gillian Judson's here. If you haven't met her in one of our previous workshops or Spring Tips course or podcast, you can do a deep dive. We've got a few of them. Gillian's the assistant professor in the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser University. Her scholarship examines imagination's role in leadership, which is such a huge thing we've been talking about. They're so overlooked. Learning, pre-K to post-secondary, and imaginative and ecological teaching practices, pre-K through post-secondary. Welcome, Gillian. Also joining us is Dr. Michelle McKay, who is a teacher and early years educator who teaches in a large urban centre in Ontario, which I love because it's so important to get those perspective of people living in urban environments and where that wonder and place is. She completed her PhD at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto in curriculum and pedagogy. And Michelle's research is situated around engaging kindergarten students in teaching and learning about truth and reconciliation. Such a beautiful and important thing. And last but absolutely not least, the wonderful Klara Redford, who also teaches in a large urban school board and has spent the majority of her career learning alongside students in the early years. I love that perspective. Klara's passion lies in amplifying student identity and lived experience as we get outside to extend learning, learn with and from the land, and develop a deeper sense of place. How wonderful. Very excited to have you share with us. I will stop sharing and pass it over to you.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everything's going to work tonight.
Yeah, I got mine out of the way. So the chirping, so yours is going to just be smooth as butter. There it is.
Okay, there we go. I'll take that away. Michelle.
Thank you, Klara, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. As Jade mentioned, we're going to be discussing how we develop a sense of place and spark curiosity and wonder with our early years students through a walking curriculum for the early years this evening.
And I guess this is a little bit about us. I started looking at imagination and outdoor learning and learning about 20 years ago, totally dating myself. And I scribbled things down, and I was fortunate enough to go back east and talk in a large urban district in Ontario. And I met, well, I didn't know I met her at the time, but we crossed paths. So Michelle, that's where you pick up our joint story.
Yes, so Gillian spoke at a conference that our school board was hosting about her original work, a walking curriculum that was situated for kindergarten to grade 12, post-secondary. And I remember thinking, hey, this is an amazing resource. I wonder what this would look like in practice. Introduced the resource to my teaching partner at the time and said, I think we should try this with our students. And we began engaging on daily walks, and bringing the learning and curriculum to life outside of the four walls of our school environment, and brought the learning into the community. And I reached out to Gillian and said, hey, I think we've done every walk in your book. Like, now what do we do? What is this about? Like, what can we do next? How can we continue this learning journey? And we began to engage in conversation about what this work could look like in the early years. And that's where Klara and I began having a lot of conversations about how can we take a walking curriculum and really bring that early years specific context to this resource.
And then I met Michelle, full circle. And then I met Michelle, and Michelle's like, hey, do you know about a walking curriculum? Have you met Gillian? And then it was perfect timing because it was an opportunity for me as an educator to really reflect on the learning environment and the indoor learning environment, and how we could extend that learning, how we could take that outside and then bring that back into the indoor learning environment. And it was just such a joy to engage in that. And then, as Michelle said, we met and we're like, hey, how could we use this for the early years? We were both very passionate about amplifying the work of early years educators and lovely little people. So we began writing actually in January, end of January, beginning of February last year. We finished the book in May, and then it had to go through the editing process, and the book was launched in November of 2023. Maybe some of you were here at our wonderful launch. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We're so glad you're with us this day. Maybe it's day for you, still afternoon or evening. Whatever it is, we're so grateful you're here.
And this evening, we're going to begin by discussing imagination with Gillian and a bit about walking, talk and explore a little bit more about the resource, explore some hesitations that you or other people you might know might have about engaging in a walking curriculum or outdoor learning, talk about next steps. We really want to have time for your questions and be able to answer some of those and share some information about staying connected.
Great. So thank you so much. And I'm really happy to talk about imagination. It's been a really great opportunity working with Michelle and Klara. I don't teach little humans. So it's great to have such experienced educators employing the approach and working together to shape it in a way that will most support those learners. But I do bring about 20 years of investigating imagination. And so I want to speak a little bit about it, because a walking curriculum happens to be an example of a bigger approach to learning called imaginative ecological education. And so I want to touch on a few features of that to describe what sets this apart. Something I've faced for my whole research career has been misunderstanding of what imagination is. There's so much misunderstanding. We shouldn't be at all surprised that it's missing from conversations in leadership. It's generally missing from education, except perhaps in the early years when we associate it in certain ways with little ones. However, we tend to miss the very foundational ways it shapes all we do and most of what we think in a world that is constantly changing and dynamic. So if you Google images of imagination, you do get pictures of little children, you get images that evoke fantasy, make-believe, unicorns, and always lots of glitter. And so what has that got to do with a CEO, or what has that got to do with a high school chemistry teacher, for example? So one of the things I've tried to do is shift the metaphor that we use. I want to bring imagination down to earth. And I invite you all to think about imagination actually as soil. Now, there's certain ways in which imagination is like soil. For one thing, it comes first. we so love to rush to talking about creativity and innovation. But as Sir Ken Robinson and Maxine Greene and Kieran Egan and many others have said, everything finds its roots in imagination. Social change and attempts to transform education, it all comes back to imagination. And yes, I like that. It comes down to earth. So think about all of the things, the new ways in which we seek to live, or the new ideas, as rooted in imagination. Also, imagination, just like soil, is contextual. We can be in contexts that don't support it. We can be in contexts that don't allow it. So imagination does require us to be open and willing to think in new ways. Just like soil is differently fertile, for example. Just go back to that previous slide, if you don't mind. Also, importantly, we can increase the fertility of soil with tools. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about these tools in just a second. Overall, I'd like you to visualize then imagination as grounded and beneath us all, because the imagination under me supports my stories. The imagination that supports our communities results in the shared stories that help define us, for example. And so think of it in a grounded way and envision that soil around you, and that is imagination. Change the slide, please. So moving in that same direction then, what is unique about a walking curriculum as an example of imaginative ecological education is that I've learned in my research is that we really need to consider the emotional connection of the child. If we want the child to feel anything, to live in a different way, to enact a way in which both humans and more than humans flourish in the world. And so Kieran Egan's work is based on the features of our imaginative lives, how our imaginations grow and develop. And he calls these cognitive tools. And so within a walking curriculum and walking curriculum in the early years, and within imaginative eco-ed, are how to use all these tools. How can we use stories and images and rhythms and patterns, heroic qualities, and all of these different tools to make the teaching engaging to our students, to help them lean into topics. So my bigger area of work is how to use imagination in all contexts, but I'm centrally involved in sort of strongly suggesting that we need imaginative engagement, especially in outdoor learning, if we want to make that learning affect us. Nothing changes unless we are affected. So in all of the walks, you'll see there's a tool that goes with them. And I want you to picture that tool cultivating the soil. The tool is cultivating the imagination. Change slide, please. And just to go back a little bit then, so if what is imagination, if I'm saying what it is not, I'd like us to think of imagination as the ability to envision the possible in all things. So it's out of that creativity and innovation flourish. But the reason why we have to think about it in education, as much as we consider it optional because we don't actually pay attention to it, human beings, as David Kresh told us, a psychologist in the US, they never just think. They perceive and they feel and they think. They think. So at the heart of that is feeling. So are we teaching students in ways that begins and ends with, how am I engaging the emotions of my learners? I don't know if we are. And for that reason, I suggest using imagination and using the tools of imagination to develop that emotional connection. And so that is at the heart of this particular practice. The walking piece came about based on an interest in accessibility. This is a bit of a misnomer because a walking curriculum has really little to do with walking, interestingly. It is more the sense of getting outside. Walk out of those classrooms, move out of those classrooms in whatever way you can to connect and slow down and immerse yourself outdoors. That's the key part. So I had developed the theories of imaginative ecological education in my doctoral work, but I wasn't able to really connect with everyday teachers that really want to expand their practice. They want to connect learners to the natural world to support ecological thinking. And so I began by thinking, what are 5 ways we can move learning outside with inquiry, with cognitive tools, and with imagination? And I slowly developed these sets of themed walks with tools. And so this was the beginning of my original work called a walking curriculum. But this quote here was really profound for me, because as I'm thinking about connecting with place and emotion and feeling, I came across this quote by Gary Snyder, who is an American naturalist. And it just sort of succinctly captures the reason why I think we need to move outdoors and explore the natural world in whatever way we can. It's a very accessible approach once we move outside of school walls. We learn a place and how to visualize spatial relationships as children on foot and with imagination. Place and the scale of place must be measured against our bodies and their capabilities. This is about exploration. This is about playful and affective engagement. And that is what, change the slide please, is at the heart of this original work called A Walking Curriculum. How do we evoke wonder and develop sense of place K through 12? And so Michelle and Klara came across this and had good success with it, but felt like, oh, we could definitely modify and adapt this for our earliest and littlest humans. And I will pass it over to them to talk about more about that.
Thank you, Gillian. And we're going to share a little bit about what makes that resource that we co-constructed together so unique. So the three of us came together, and many of you are early years educators or working or support earlier settings. And we all know that our pedagogy and philosophy when it comes to the early years is unique. There is a specific context that supports our early learners and their thinking and learning. And so with this book, what we've done is we've taken Gillian's research and her original work and adapted it specifically for that early years context. And when we refer to early years, we're generally speaking about kindergarten to grade 2, but this resource can definitely support our learners before kindergarten and other earlier settings, as well as other early learners in grades 3, 4, and 5. I think Klara and I often speak about our pedagogy in the early years, and it's sound pedagogy that can be supported or extend outside of that early years context. So although this is early year specific, you might find learners in other contexts that it may be appropriate or accessible for as well. We've divided up the resource into 4 general chapters. We set the context for the walk and explore some of Gillian's research at the beginning of the book. Chapter 2 outlines 33 different walks with the associated cognitive tools that Gillian discussed. In chapter 3, we talk about how to make that thinking and learning visible. How do we document walks? How do we assess the learning that's happening and show that we are using those walks as structured instructional time with key learning that's happening within our practice? We share some acknowledgements, and in that Appendix A resource section, we share resources that you can use with students, but there's also a self-study section that you might be interested in if you were to use this book for a book talk with colleagues or other educators that you might be working with.
So how to prepare for a walk? These are questions we always get. You know, how can this work in my context? And when we wrote this book and when we were beginning to think about how we can best support educators in the early years and beyond, we wanted to be able to provide you with a book that was ready to go, that you can actually take this and use it tomorrow in your practice. So when the way that the walks are laid out, there's very little preparation for you as educators. So one of the first sections in the walks is a minds-on that we suggest for you, which includes the imagination piece, the cognitive tool, how that can be used in a minds-on, whether it's asking questions, whether it's engaging emotion, it could be prior knowledge and understanding, activating that depending on where you're situated and the experiences that your students have. It could be that you are activating some new vocabulary for students. Perhaps you have students who are English language learners and you want to be able to get them to use some new language, to get them to make connections while they're outside, not only to place, but to language as well. These walks can happen anywhere. Michelle and I are both in urban settings. Perhaps your school doesn't have any green spaces around it, and that's okay. All of these walks are meant to happen anywhere and in any setting, around your school, around your community, on the concrete. It doesn't have to happen in a forested setting. We also suggest for you the possibility of some mentor texts that you can read in this Minds On, making some predictions, creating anchor charts, and beautifully developing oral language skills with our young learners, which is part and parcel of our curriculum expectations. I think across North America is developing those oral language skills.
And here's an example of one of the walks that's included in the text. It was important to us, as Klara mentioned, that this book was ready to go, easy to use. All of the walks have a consistent layout so that you're not trying to figure out, what am I doing today? What does this walk look like? They all have follow kind of a 3-part lesson plan. So they have that Minds On component, they have the walk component, and then they have that consolidation component. Klara explored the Minds On with you. All of our walks have 3 subsections included in them. We talk about what to encourage students to notice on the walk. How are we communicating with one another, between students and between educators and students on walks? How are we documenting the learning that's happening on walks? So each walk has some different suggestions or things that you could try. And then we have various suggestions for consolidation. So conversations that you might engage with, there might be some guiding questions that you can use with students to engage in conversations post-walk, either outdoors or indoors, to bridge those environments. Each walk includes a set of suggested mentor texts that you might read to extend the learning or further kind of those conversations that you've had on walks. We also offer extensions for play for each walk. These can happen in either indoor or outdoor learning environments, but we know that young children learn through play. Research tells us that. So it's important that these walks, what we're talking about, we're not going on a walk, check, that's done, the learning's over. We want to provide multiple opportunities for students to explore these concepts and extend that understanding. So we've offered some suggestions of how you can do that, or how you may do that through play with students. And each walk, again, there's that cognitive tool at the top right under it, and that cognitive tool is infused in all 3 of these components of each walk.
When we talk about the consolidation piece, it really is essential to the walk itself. I mean, the walk is important. I think all 3 of these sections carry as much weight as the other section. And we want students to understand that the learning doesn't just stop after the walk is over. We want to empower the students to be able to take that learning back into your classrooms, into those 4 walls, and continue the learning, continue to ask questions and wonder and want to know more and investigate. So perhaps that consolidation is going to include educators thinking about possible prompts or invitations that you can have back in the classroom to further that wonder and that curiosity. More mentor texts, as Michelle mentioned. We do have mentor text suggestions. Those aren't the only mentor texts for each of those walks. Obviously, you will have an abundance of mentor texts that you know as well and can use for those walks. There's already amazing new mentor texts that are out there since we've written the book that we would also suggest. And this consolidation allows that piece of us as educators or an educator team to really begin to see that growth in our students' thinking and understanding, depending on the curriculum area that we're looking at. And I think Michelle mentioned it. We're not just going out there for a walk and for running around. This is focused and intentional use of time for educators to be outside, to connect to curriculum, to connect to imagination, and to begin to allow students time to develop a sense of place.
And as educators, it's important that we're able to document the learning, to demonstrate how these walks are curricular focused, how the learning is happening. Yes, we're walking, we're getting steps in, there is that physical component to walks, but as Gillian mentioned, it's not so much about the walking itself or the physical motion of walking. It's about connecting to developing that sense of place and connecting to the community and engaging our imaginations and learning. And by documenting the learning, we're really able to demonstrate how we are using that as instructional time to meet curriculum or program expectations and really engage in deep, meaningful learning with students that's within an authentic environment for them that's meaningful. So when we're noticing and naming the learning that's occurring, turning to those program or curriculum documents that guide whatever environment we're practicing in to demonstrate how these walks are meeting those expectations and are providing those opportunities for learning for students. Making sure that we're engaging in extensions for play, bringing the outdoor learning back into the indoor learning environment, engaging in those conversations, consolidating that learning to bridge those two spaces. When it comes to documenting the learning, again, that's going to be very context specific. When I began engaging with a walking curriculum, we brought our iPads outside, our class iPads. We took a lot of photographs. So on the right side of the screen are some photographs that I threw in Pic Collage. And I would tweet these out daily. And families were able to see the walk that we went on and some of the learning that had happened. We had clipboards that we brought outside where students would document, maybe draw pictures, record or tally certain things that we were looking at, draw pictures together or independently. We co-created with students. We took photographs from our walks and co-created Google Slides presentations to demonstrate over time. Each slide was a different walk that we had gone on. And that's where I was able to afterwards go back and link it to our program or curriculum expectations to demonstrate this is the learning that happened. Myself and my teaching partner would use anecdotal comments to write down quotes that students had said. But there's so many ways. And in the book, we explore lots of different options for how you may choose to document that learning. We had documentation panels on the wall in our classroom that students constructed with us and could speak to when people came into our classrooms. And so we had that documentation piece in terms of the student learning, but a walking curriculum for the early years also provides an opportunity for you as an educator to engage in reflective practice and look at shifts in your pedagogy that have happened over time. So by creating these documentation panels and long-term documentation pieces that showed how we were engaging with a walking curriculum, I was able to see how my practice and pedagogy had shifted as an early years educator. And this is what really drove or led to a much larger kind of research project that I had completed around how this work led us into work around truth and reconciliation and kind of created that foundation for us within my practice. I think also within the book, we have a self-study that Gillian has included in the book that you can engage with to engage with some other early years educators to be able to engage in reflective practice and really amplifying the learning and sharing it outside of our school or community environments or classrooms so that others can see how we are engaging with a walking curriculum. So I chose to do it at the time. This was a while ago. I was using Twitter at the time to amplify our learning, but sharing it out with others. We had other educators at our school. I had grade 5 teachers. I see you outside walking every day. What are you doing? I said, oh, we're using a walking curriculum. Do you want to come with us? And we would have other grades come on walks with us. And I would plan with the teacher about the walk that we were going on to make sure that there was entry points for all students. But we really amplified that learning and were able to demonstrate how a walking curriculum was a focused learning time for our students.
We have lots of questions when we do talk about a walking curriculum from educators about questions about getting outside. So we wanted to address some of those with you today, some of the kind of most frequently asked questions that we get asked. So I'll start with the first one. We'll just kind of like try to zip through these. Students being prepared and appropriate clothing for the weather, depending on your area. We often suggest looking at your lost and found area. Schools collect a lot of stuff during lost and found during all seasons. So if that doesn't get picked up, rather than bagging it and taking it to the local Salvation Army or wherever you donate your clothing, perhaps saving some of that, having it washed and having some of that available, having teachers in your building or families donate clothing that might be too big for their children. Some fundraising that might, maybe you have a parent council or fundraising committees that could fundraise for certain things that you really feel you're missing. So there really is lots of opportunities for students to be prepared. We do suggest in the book, in preparing for these walks, a letter going out to families, letting them know that you will be engaging in walks on a regular basis and that they will need to be prepared to be outside for longer periods of time. That includes perhaps snow pants and snow boots and hats and mitts, or rain gear if you're going out on a rainy day, which I'm telling you, as you know, most of us early years educators here, how much fun is it to take students out into the rain? They love it. So it's really not a barrier to this learning. That can definitely be overcome in terms of being prepared for the weather. We have a settlement worker who works at our school to help with our families who are new to Canada, to help them understand what kind of clothing they will need and access clothing for them. Perhaps you have certain kinds of services that you can also access in your communities to also help your families understand what is needed for being outside. Michelle?
Yes. Klara, was there a specific question that you wanted me to expand on?
No, just go ahead, pick one.
Okay. When it comes to safety accessibility considerations, I think again it's so context specific, and we could sit here all night and have a 2-hour webinar just on how to make walking accessible. But I think one of the main points is I've taught in many different communities with many different class makeups, and I've always been able to find a way to problem solve any challenges that we might encounter so that all of our students could safely and completely access the learning that was happening while walking. Work with resource teachers, special education resource teachers that you might have if it's a physical need that we're talking about, or with families in terms of how do students physically access spaces within the community and what can we do to make those environments more accessible for students. Thinking about safety, if you have we always just take walkie-talkies with us and have our cell phones on so that we could call for support if needed, or if there were any safety concerns. Try and go with, if it's the first time you're going on a walk and you're not sure about taking your class out into the community or out into the environment or on the land alone, maybe budding up with another educator with their class and going out together are some suggestions around how we have made our walks safer and more accessible for students. I think that Claire and I have spoken a little bit about justifying the use of instructional time for walking and how to assess learning, but we definitely explore that in the walk. I think if you're engaging in a play-based or inquiry-based program, it provides many opportunities or inroads into a walking curriculum. And when you explore the different walks that we have, there are some that very clearly connect to math, let's say, or science, and aren't math specific walks, but those connections can be easily made. But I think one of the beautiful things about a walking curriculum when it comes to the early years, as Klara mentioned, is there's always that oral language component that's embedded with those conversations and walks. So it's a great way to develop vocabulary and knowledge of certain terms with students within an environment.
And just quickly, students not wanting to go outside, and also limited prior knowledge related to outdoor learning for educators. That's a question we always get. I don't know anything about like nature or being outside. And you don't have to. We suggest that you start small, maybe start with a walk. You know, you don't have to go out every day. I mean, that we would love that. Wouldn't it be amazing if our world was that we could engage in education with our learners every day outside? But start small, go for a walk one day and see how it goes. And you don't have to go out for an hour, go out for 10 minutes. See where that gets you. Start small with your students so that they begin to experience that being outside, the joy of being outside, beginning to develop that sense of place, that sense of belonging, and this world that's out there that's accessible to them. And you are going to be learning along with your students. And that's what's glorious about being an early years educator, is that we're co-learners together. So you don't have all the answers, and you will learn together with your students, which is so beautiful. Next steps. We wanted to talk about what you could do beyond the book. Michelle's going to talk about this amazing document here called Walking Forward, and maybe Gillian, you would also like to speak to that resource. And then I'll speak a little bit about the classroom environment.
So we wanted to begin by acknowledging that, or stating that this book does not take an Indigenous worldview, or we're not stating that by engaging in a walking curriculum, you're engaging in teaching and learning about truth and reconciliation. As I was speaking earlier, I think what a walking curriculum provided for me and the students that I taught was that inroad to developing a sense of place and becoming familiar and beginning to develop a relationship with the land that we were on. And from there, we were able to further that work and engage in teaching and learning about truth and reconciliation in a variety of other ways. But this book doesn't contain that work that I was discussing earlier. Gillian, I don't know if you just want to give a quick sentence about Walking Forward, but that would be a resource that would contain that kind of worldview within it.
Yes, absolutely. This was work I did with an Indigenous colleague of mine named Heidi Wood, and we asked educators to explore imaginative ecological practices, First Peoples principles for learning through spirals of inquiry, and that connect with Noi. And so it was very teacher generated, and it was very authentic, and it was wonderful experience for me to work with Heidi to see from her perspective as an Indigenous person how these walks sort of align and how they might support and bridge different perspectives. So it's a beginning, but in this particular resource, there's 7 of them that are showcased, and they each have First People principles of learning tied directly to them.
And if you wanted to begin connecting to Indigenous ways of knowing and Indigenous education, there's all kinds of other vehicles that you can, as educators, take. There are free courses offered. You can, of course, amplify authors and illustrators that are First Nations, Métis, or Inuit in your programs as mentor texts when you go out walking. This is a picture of kindergarten students engaging in and learning about the Indigenous Peoples Map of Canada. We spent a long time looking at this map and developing more curiosity and wonder and questions, connecting with knowledge keepers, friendship centers. Take yourselves and go to a powwow. Which is an amazing experience. They are open to Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. So there's lots of ways that you can connect to community and begin your own journey of learning about Indigenous ways of knowing and being. we wanted to ask you to throw into the chat after all of this. We're going to be closing up very shortly. What is something you are taking with you that you could use in your practice this week? Is there something that maybe we sparked inside of you to get you excited to perhaps start with something tomorrow or next week? This is the perfect time of year across Turtle Island for us to be getting outside and beginning to engage with this work, and impetus for you to continue to engage in this work as we begin the new school year as well. Maybe you can put your thoughts in the chat. And in the meantime, we're just going to, before we go to questions, we're just going to throw this on here. If you wanted to keep connected, maybe you can just take a quick picture of this. And I know that we're happy to continue to learn with you as well. We would love to see what you're doing on your walks and how your young learners are engaging with learning outside. So here's some connections for us on X and Instagram, the Outdoor Learning Store. There's 2 podcasts, one that Gillian leads, Cultivating Imagination, and we're beginning a podcast called Why and Wonder, Michelle and I, talking everything early years. Education That Inspires is Gillian's website, where you can learn much more about imaginative, ecological education and imagination. Did I miss anything, Michelle or Gillian? Okay, so Jade, I think we want to throw it back to you now.
Wonderful. If you don't mind closing your share screen so that, yeah, so you're nice and big. Oh, just 1 minute and I'll come back into the world. Some reason. Okay. Oh my goodness, that was so wonderful. I knew it would be. But I just think it's it's a simple thing, this idea of walking, but the amount of effort and direction in that pedagogy is so special. It connects with so many different people, but it is something super intentional. And the more intentional I've got with my walks with students, I've just seen this real big shift in the way that they view those learning spaces and the way that they then see everything as a learning space, as opposed to it just being recreational or play. And so, yeah, very, very inspiring. Thank you so much. I don't know if you were able to keep up with the chat, but lots and lots of gratitude in there. Okay, a couple of questions. Hannah asks, in the book, are there further lesson ideas to continue the walks later in the day or maybe back in the classroom and develop in there?
So that would be the final portion, the consolidation portion of the walk, where we talk about extensions for play, where we outline some suggestions of things you might do in the classroom through play, also through any of those mentor texts. But any of that consolidation piece would bridge those 2 spaces for you for sure.
Incredible. Kayla's asking about accessibility. So on a walk, maybe I have a 3-year-old who uses a wheelchair and the area isn't really accessible. How could you handle that perhaps?
So I think thinking about or us stating that these walks can happen anywhere. So if you're in like in Ontario, in the spring, we have 3-year-olds in our kindergarten program. So I don't know if it's like you're talking a formal school setting or a different early childhood setting. Again, it's maybe context specific for you, but I would say that generally speaking, these walks can happen anywhere. So if a space isn't accessible, finding another space that you might have access to. So if we're thinking about a school environment, we started our walks on school grounds and furthered them out into the community, but we were walking on sidewalks when we engaged in our walks. We weren't walking in, we didn't have naturalized spaces to explore with students, making it accessible for anyone, regardless of whether they're walking or using a wheelchair. That space was accessible. So I would say looking at spaces where all can participate or engage in that walk around your center, around your school setting, so that all students are able to engage in it. And by you as an educator going out prior to walking and becoming familiar with those spaces, you're able to see what barriers might exist for students and how we can ensure that they are accessible. Gillian?
Absolutely. It's more about once we're outdoors, how are we allowing ourselves to explore? And so you can move into any space in whatever way you move and enjoy that and explore that for sure. So it all depends contextually. I was just going to add, it's such an honor to have Nadine McSpadden in the room today. Hi, Nadine. Nadine was centrally involved in Walking Forward, and she's thankfully added to the chat a Weebly, a set of resources where there might be only 7 walks articulated in a Walking Forward, but in this Weebly, Heidi and Nadine together shaped all 30 walks with an Indigenous perspective, and she shared that in there. So thank you so much for being here today, Nadine, and for adding that. I appreciate you.
That's lovely. And I've added that link into our shared resource document, which I've just popped into the chat again. So if you've got something to add, I put the little piece on Kieran Egan in there because some of you were really interested in who that person was. So there's a little bio there. And so please feel free. That's a shared space for all of us, and all of the links to all of the resources that are connected or published here and shared through the Outdoor Learning Store are on that page as well. Make sure you go to the right tab at the bottom, April 30th. There's a picture of this workshop on the top right, so you know which you're on the right tab. Okay, super helpful. Next question. So a couple of people mentioned this, but like my preschoolers cry when we tell them they have to put on the muddy buddy suits, or people talking about this. And then a couple of people were like, yeah, but then the minute they've got them on and they go outside, they're not crying anymore. Or and I found it's like the repetition thing. It's just the practice or having a fun song. I'm a bit of a singer, a terrible singer, but voracious. Do you have any other suggestive tips to help people get comfortable getting in their transitions?
I think it's just that practice of doing it. Michelle and I have both worked in an early years classroom. So especially in the wintertime, we know what it's like getting 3- and 4-year-olds ready to go outside with snow pants and snow boots and hats and mitts or muddy buddies or whatever it is. So we understand that, but it's about a process, and it's about continuing to create joy around the process of going out, preparing them that they're going out, and it becomes something that they really look forward to, letting them know the day before that tomorrow we are going out on a walk. You're going to be prepared. We're going to have so much fun. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to see. And just creating that joy from your space as well as from the student space.
And we used to walk first thing in the morning. Again, context specific. We had control over when we went outside. Students didn't get undressed. They stayed dressed, so they transitioned to school and they were wearing their outdoor gear. They kept it on. We took attendance and we were outside very, very quickly to eliminate that transition, if you can, in terms of getting dressed. But yes, a lot of prompting, a lot of supports, social stories if you need them to support that, a lot of visuals, a lot of practice. And with time, all of a sudden you're like, wow, we all did that. No, it was only 5 minutes after 2 months.
Yeah.
And if I can just add, at the beginning, it would be so great if you connected with, if you're in a school setting and not an early years setting or preschool setting, but if you're in a school setting, how great would it be to connect with some other classes, as Michelle mentioned before, that they did, grade 3s or 4s or 5s or 8s. They love those experiences with young students and connecting with those young students, and what a sense of community that builds for your school as well. And perhaps they can help out with getting them ready to go outside and creating that excitement and going outside with them to learn together.
Just glorious. And I have, someone's talking about adult suits. I have like overpants and like this sort of very old-fashioned I don't know, we'd call it a sou'wester, like this huge sort of bright yellow plastic jacket thing that I get into my special gear, and then I feel ready as well, and it becomes this sort of ritual of joy. Okay, we are running out of time here. Somebody asked about risk and liability, and I'm going to put a link to Outdoor Play Canada there, because do you agree that that maybe is possibly the best resource there? Go, Gillian.
Yes, though it can be as risky as going outside the schoolyard, like into the playground. No, I mean, many people take this as you're going off school grounds and all of these things. Well, initially, no, that wasn't ever the intention. So the risk is quite low if you're on already space that the children are allowed to freely run around on at recess. That said, the children's safety is the utmost concern, so you might need additional supervision or whatever. So your resource plus that note that this isn't about moving off of school grounds all the time.
And at that Outdoor Play Canada, firstly, they have an amazing statement from all the top researchers around risky play and those sorts of things, like if you're talking about that. And the other thing is there's this sort of risk assessment. There's a look at like a plan so you can identify hazards, even if you're still on your school grounds. It gives you all these really practical, there's a full toolkit that you can work your way through, including that you can deliver to your administrators and parents with letters and things. So it's really all encompassing. So that would be my recommendation, because that's the top researchers there. Okay, my last question, they just keep coming in thick and fast, but this one came up a couple of times, is about runners. People having students who like to go for a solo adventure. Do you have any tips on that sort of management to make educators feel more comfortable?
As Gillian mentioned, stay in a space that you're familiar with. So all students are going outside at some point in their day. Begin those walks on school property, where there might be very clear visual boundaries for students. As she mentioned, there's lower risk. I think going with multiple educators, if it's possible, talking through with the child's parents, they bring them into the community. What strategies do you use when you go shopping in the community to keep them with you, that you found successful, and having those conversations and trying different strategies. But I think gradually working your way up, again, it's so context specific and child specific in terms of strategies, but thinking about what are they running for? Is it's something that they're looking to access? There's a lot there we could get into, but I think sticking with a space where you can keep all students safe is of paramount importance. So keeping it on that schoolyard and gradually building up kind of your walks as you develop capacity with students around staying safe.
Amazing. Would you like to add anything, Klara or Gillian, before we wrap up here? Go, Gillian.
I'm just in awe. We have 500 people at the end of a day where they've given themselves to their students and they're still here learning. And I just am the biggest school and educational location educator supporter ever. So thank you all for coming. It means the world and to all of us that you're taking this time. So thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Klara, Michelle, Gillian. Your knowledge is just mind-blowing, pure gold, as someone described it. And this book is beautiful. It is so practical. Gillian, all yours too. It really, yeah, it's a fantastic resource. Thank you so much for sharing so much about it in this space and giving everyone so much inspiration. I will say thank you very much. Everybody don't leave just quickly. We're going to do a quick prize draw, because who doesn't love a prize? And 2 of you will get gift cards to the Outdoor Learning Store that would enable you to buy this book for free. First winner, Suzy New. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correct. SUZYNGUE, Suzy New. Please, you don't actually have to do anything. Stephanie is going to find you in the registration list of all things, and we will get that to you via email. Okay, next one, random scroll. Abby Pickens, ABBY, PICKENS. Abby Pickens, you are a winner of another $25 gift card. Congratulations. Okay, we've got two $25 gift cards to the Take Me Outside store. Again, these are both non-profit stores. Everything goes back into supporting outdoor learning. Laura Tripp, LAURATRIPP. Laura Tripp, you have a TMO gift card winging its way to you through the ether. And last but not least is Monia Tabrizi, MONIRTABRIZI, Monia Tabrizi. You are our fourth and final winner. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to our incredible panel of experts, educators, and wonderful beings. Wishing you a wonderful evening. Goodbye. Limt, Geisig Schmiert.